Welcome everyone to Authors on the Air. I'm your host, Pam Stack. I'm also a book junkie and a cat wrangler, for those who don't know me. My guest today is my friend Alan Eskens, who has just finished writing his 9th book and is starting on his 10th. Now, Alan and I go back, I think, almost to your first book, the first time we spoke. It's been a while.
Yeah.
And we bumped into each other at BoucherCon. It was wonderful. And I hadn't talked to you. So you said, let's talk. And I said, okay, let's talk. How have you been doing?
I've been doing very well. The whole lockdown thing turns out my life as a writer really isn't much different than lockdown. I sit in my basement, I type, don't really see people, and that worked out okay.
It's all the same, right? Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
the same. Yeah, nothing much changes. Well, I'm glad I got to see you this year. So let's talk about your very first book. Do you have that copy with you? Do you have your very first book? Because it's in my
If you excuse
library.
me, I go grab it.
I'm sorry? Yeah, get it for
I'll
me.
grab it.
Yeah, do.
Here I am. Okay, so
Okay, oh, you got all of them. Good. So let me see your first book. Hold
first
it a
book,
little
The Life
closer.
We Bury.
The Life We Bury. Okay. I want to just kind of go back and see, thank you, and talk to you about your first book and how long had it been percolating with you?
Well, okay, that's a good question because The Life We Bury wasn't the first book I wrote. It was the
Okay.
first one I got published.
Published.
The
Okay.
first book I wrote, actually, I spent 20 years working on it. I was practicing law and I loved writing. I loved telling stories in my head. And then I was learning the process, the craft of taking it from my head and putting it on paper. And so that became my first manuscript. And it became my 6th novel, Nothing More Dangerous. So I worked on Nothing More Dangerous for, like I said, 20 years. And it was a learning process. I was learning how to write and it was fun. And it wasn't ready. So I put it aside. And I had this idea for another book. So I wrote The Life We Bury. And that became the first one I got published.
I think that's amazing. My brother's an attorney. There are so many writers who were practicing attorneys. I don't know if you still practice or not, or if you said bye-bye to that, because that's a long day of work when you're an attorney in practice. How did you work in time to write? Because when you're doing billable hours, I mean, isn't it like by every 7 minutes or something of work you do, your billable hours are going? So one, how did you find the time? And two, when you write briefs, they're very to the point. There's no background or anything as far as the color of the room was white when this, whatever it is you're writing a brief for. What did that teach you about writing? So one, how were you able to do it? And two,
Yep.
what did lawyering teach you about writing?
Okay, so I was able to do it because it was what I did for fun. So I would get off work, I would come home, spend time with my daughter when she's in bed. I would sit down and write just because I enjoyed writing. When I had spare time, I would go to conferences or like the Iowa Summer Writers Festival, the Law Literary Center. I'd take classes. I was reading books on how to write, just working on the craft in my spare time, because I never really thought at that point that I was going to be a published author, that I was going to make a living at this. I thought I was just going to improve my skills so that I would enjoy writing for myself more. And that was really what it was all about. So I would go to work. I'd work from 8 until 5. I would that was dedicated time for practicing law. I didn't want to give short shrift to my clients. But when 5 o'clock hit, I went home, spent family time, did my writing. And like I said, I did that for 20 years. And when I finally got published and I wanted to publish more books, now it became hard because I was under a time crunch. Before The Life We Bury hit store shelves, I had a 3-book deal for one of the characters from The Life We Bury named Max Rupert. And so for the next few years, it was work, writing, and those two things. And by that point, my daughter was off to college, and so it was easy for me to, I come home from the office and I go straight to writing, and I did that for until 2017 when I retired from the practice of law and became a full-time writer.
How
Not
amazing. Had
quite
it
in
been
question,
your dream to be a
but
published author?
it was kind of in the back of my head. It's like, wouldn't that be cool someday? It was more of a bucket list thing
Right.
until The Life of Barry got published. Then it
Oh,
was, this is really fun and cool. I want to do it more.
wow.
And that's when I went into it with more deliberation. I set up timetables. Okay, I want to have this book done by this date, and so I need to, stay on schedule, and it became, kind of a job. After I retired from the practice of law, it was quite easy to, relax, slow down my pace. If I do 1,000 words a day, I have a first draft done in 3 to 4 months,
That's
and then I can
fantastic.
edit it.
So, do you work well on a timeline? So, if your editor says, I need your book by this time, are you okay with that? Because sometimes the law, it depends on what type of law you practice, will say, okay, you have to have your briefs in here, you have to appear in court here, and oh no, we're going to move it back and shuffle it over and all. I mean, my brother is a litigator, corporate litigator. He's got cases that are going on for 5 years. So, I don't think a timeline matters for him so much. But how is it for you? Are you good with working with on a deadline?
I've always been one who self-imposes deadlines.
Ah,
So, I in my younger years, I was a procrastinator, and I was, a little more laid back with my time. But when I
mhm.
became a lawyer, an attorney, I made a point to be very, diligent with my timelines, and especially when I was writing and practicing law both, I was on strict, okay, you got to do 1,000 words a day, that done, move on, and so my editors really don't put pressure on me as much as I put pressure on me. So the novel I'm writing right now, it's not due to the publisher until December. I will probably have the first draft done in April, and then between April and December, I will revise it and spending time with it and doing what I need to do to make it as good as I can make it.
So speaking of making it as good, I hear a lot of different methods that writers use to ensure that their story sounds authentic with dialogue, that there's continuity in the story. And one of the things they do is they ask someone to read their book out loud to them. So the writer listens while someone reads the book. And another one, of course, is the writer reads each chapter out loud. Obviously, it's, tickling different parts of your brain and everything. What is your trick, or what method do you use, even if it's a trick, to make sure that your writing sounds authentic, that the voices are what you would hear every day conversation versus strictly English, the language that you learn when you're in an English composition class?
Yeah. So the first revision is I do it on computer. The first 2 or 3 revisions I'm doing on computer. When I feel it's pretty close, I will then print it up and I'll read it on paper, because somehow reading it on paper, it's different than reading it on a computer.
Mm-hmm.
And I will also then, when I'm done with that draft, I will then read it out loud to myself. I don't have
Wow.
somebody else read it, because if somebody else reads it, their emphasis isn't going to how I hear it in my own head. It may be a good thing to do, but I just don't. No one reads my work until I'm ready for it to be read. So
So, which
I read
way
it because,
is the
yes,
most effective way
as
for you
you're
to edit?
reading it out loud is different.
Right, it is. So, which do you find
Pardon
more
me?
effective? Which do you find more effective in picking up changes that you want to make? Reading it from print, or when you read it out loud to yourself?
Reading it from print, I pick up more of the prose. I read it to myself, I pick up more on the dialogue, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it
Uh,
does make sense,
so
actually.
when, when I'm reading it to myself, I will catch things. For example, in one of my books, I had a character named Thaddeus, and so as I'm typing, and it would be a possessive, or Thaddeus's.
Right.
And it wasn't until I read it out loud that that extra syllable really bothered me. So it was, instead of being Thaddeus's, so I renamed him Alexander. So it's Alexander's, and add that extra syllable. And just reading it
Well,
out
there you
loud
go.
made that in my head come alive.
Yeah, it's a tongue twister, and I see what you mean. It's a speed bump
Yeah.
for some readers, I will tell you. Um, is there a particular author that you like that you'd like to emulate? Not their style, because you can only write your own story, but who is
Mhm.
someone that you really look at as a really great storyteller?
I think Dennis Lehane is at the top of my list, who I got to meet at BoucherCon.
Right.
Uh, he's at the top of my list because up until I read Mystic River, I planned on not being a mystery writer. I was an
Really?
attorney. I didn't want to be known as just another attorney who wrote mysteries. But then I read Mystic River and I saw the character drive of that story, and how really the mystery wasn't the centerpiece; it was the characters, and I love that,
Right. Right.
and the deeper themes. And I thought I can do that. I can write mysteries, but in my mysteries, it's going to be a character story. Somebody described my work as a Trojan horse, in that the mystery genre is the horse, but once you get into it, it's the people inside that are what's
Right.
important.
Right.
And so when I'm contemplating a story, when I'm outlining a story, I will spend a lot of time on, let's just put the mystery aside. What's the story really about? The dynamics of the people. What's the themes that I want to really address? For example, Saving Emma, which comes out in September. It's on. So the mystery aspect of it is Bodhi Sandin is a law professor. He works, as a part time for the Innocence Project. He gets a case where his client is in a mental hospital, um, having been found not guilty by reason of insanity for the murder of a mega church pastor. So there's the mystery. Did this guy, Elijah, did he commit the crime or not? But then there's this another level to the story of Bodhi dealing with his ward, this 14-year-old girl that he is taking care of, and Bodhi's struggle with coming to understand his relationship with that young lady. And then there's another level of the conversations between Bodhi, who is an agnostic slash atheist, talking to this man who thinks he's a prophet, and the discussions back and forth that have a religious nature to them. So yeah, there's a mystery here, and it's a really fun mystery. It's probably my most Agatha Christie style mystery so far. But it's the other aspects of the story that draw me to stories.
You have to, I think, as a reader, we have to connect with your characters that you're creating. So when you're starting, because I have to have a feeling, not just a nothing, when I'm reading characters, whether they're considered the protagonist or the antagonist, whether they're labeled good or bad. To me, there's always a little bit of each in all characters, unless you're
Mm-hmm.
talking about someone like a serial killer. And even then, you can almost think what happened that turned him like that. So when you are thinking about writing, are you thinking about a character first, or are you thinking about the story and then developing the character to wrap it around?
Um, so my style of writing is a little different from most. So I wrote The Life We Bury, and I really loved the characters that I created in that novel. So I
Right.
then took four main characters from The Life We Bury, and I did story arcs for them. So
Oh,
Max Rupert has a 4-book story arc for his character. Joe Talbert, who is the main character in The Life We Bury, has a 3-book arc for him and his girlfriend Lila. Bodhi Sandin, who's got a minor part in that novel, he's got now his 3rd book for his arc. So I've brought these characters in these arcs, and so I have the characters already. And what I do is I think, okay, what would be an interesting story to tell? What would I enjoy reading? And then the question is, does one of my characters have the ability to tell this story. Now, so far, that has been the case. So, book 9, Saving Emma, is Bodhi Sandon's story. But book 10, I had an idea for a story that I really wanted to tell. And it started with a character. And that character was not any character I'd written about. So, book 10, which is untitled at this point, uh, it is completely different from all my other books in terms of it's a story of a librarian, a middle-aged librarian here in Minnesota, quiet, woman who just doesn't stand out, who has this extraordinary history that nobody knows about. And the history takes us back to Bosnia in 1995 and the Balkan
Wow.
Wars. And I'm just having such a fun time. I enjoy writing all my novels. So when I'm writing a novel, it's like I really enjoy doing this.
Are you a big research dude?
Very much so.
Are you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's important to me to have authenticity in my stories. So, for example, my character in the novel I'm writing now, she grew up in Bosnia. She's 17 years old in 1995. I don't know the world of a 17-year-old girl in Bosnia in 1995, a Muslim girl at that. So I found actually a professor at the University of Minnesota who is helping me to make sure that my story is authentic. I'm doing research, in terms of I understand the Balkan Wars better than I ever thought I would. I'm understanding, the politics of it, the uniform, the landscape. But
Wow.
having someone there, I can ask questions of, for example, what would a young girl call her father? Pop, dad, and the answer is Bibo. And so I'm able to use that in my book.
Interesting. Even the little things like that make a big difference and lend it authenticity. So, you're doing a standalone now. Do you like doing series or do you prefer a standalone?
Well, I don't really think that I do series
You do
because
connected
if you
characters,
read
then
arcs,
I should say.
I do connected characters and I do like character arcs. So, for example, there's a 3-book arc from Max Rupert, The Guise of Another, The Heavens May Fall, The Deep Dark Descending. During that arc, he goes from being a man with a strong moral compass in the first book to a man questioning that moral compass in the second book to a man who has given up that moral compass in the third book. So there's an arc for his character that stretches over the 3 books. That's what I enjoy. Uh, what I don't think I would be able to do is your normal detective series of a detective going from book to book to book solving crimes, because I really want to put my characters, my protagonists, through a rough time. I want to put them through a
I
crucible
understand what you're
in
saying,
each book,
and
and I
have
don't want to have.
repercussions for it.
Yeah,
They have to have a repercussion for whatever it
yeah,
is they do, versus just coming up in the next book and
right.
dusting themselves off and starting all over again. It is kind of an odd thing. I like some series, but not enough to read more than 4 or 5 books in it. And I have to just stop because it, unless it's someone who's a master of storytelling, and there are very few who are masters of storytelling, I'm really not interested in continuing on to the next adventure without seeing a change in personality. I don't want everybody killed
Right.
off, then and then kill the next person off. All the guy's friends, somebody's like an Angela Lansbury Murder She Wrote thing. Someone's always getting knocked off. I don't like that because it almost feels predictable. And if you're writing a predictable book to someone
Well,
like me who reads 400 books a year, I'm insulted by that.
well, and one of the keys to tension is, number one, you make your character relatable to the reader. So once your reader hacked in and can relate and feel what the protagonist is feeling, you have to have uncertainty. If you don't have uncertainty,
Yeah.
then the reader's going to know, yeah, this character is going to survive this car crash. He's going to survive the fight. He's going to survive whatever is happening because he's going to be
Right.
in the next book. Um,
Right.
and I have killed off protagonists before. So
Right.
I don't want people to feel that. I was reading a very famous author who wrote a series, and as I'm reading, I'm thinking, I this guy's gonna get. He's in a fight. I know he's going to win the fight. I know he's going to, survive all this stuff because he's going to be in another book because there's a series.
Right.
I don't, I don't like writing that. I like writing where I could kill off a protagonist and end a story arc, make some readers mad, but it would satisfy me at least. I mean,
Well,
I
I think it's
life,
satisfactory
life is
to good
unpredictable.
readers. Love that. I mean, I like a twist. Now, I read across genre except for horror and historical. Sorry, I just don't read any of those. But I want to be surprised at the end. I want to have a false ending and then the real ending. I want to really not be able to figure it out. And when you read a lot in one genre, you can figure it out. I know I've read a good book. If at the end of the book I'm going, holy crap, I can't believe that's what happened. I want to be stunned. And because if I'm stunned, I'm left so satisfied by the book. So I hear you exactly what you're saying. You said that Dennis Lehane is a favorite of yours. He also is mine. I have his new book, Small Mercies. It's excellent. He will be a guest here within the next few months. Would you like to come back and visit?
I'd love to.
Okay. How about I turn the microphone over to you for a little while?
To interview Dennis Lehane?
Yeah.
I'd be glad to.
Okay. Tell everybody where we can find you, your website. And I'm sure that has all your contact information.
Yes. So you can find my main website is www.alaneskens.com. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, a lot of different places. Uh, and I use social media primarily just to let people know what's next. When I'm doing a book tour, here's where I'm going to be, that kind of thing. So
Right.
I don't really do a lot of personal posting, but I do use it for just keeping readers and fans aware of what's happening next.
That's probably why you're sane, Alan, because you
Well,
don't use it for everything else. you
yeah,
know, it's a hostile territory out there every so often. But if you're careful, you don't get caught up in nonsense, then you can have a pleasant day on social media. Will you come back when the book comes out?
yes, absolutely, yes.
I
And
love
it
talking.
comes out September 19th. It's available for pre-order now.
Okay. Who are you
My last
published
book
by
for
this
September,
time? Who's publishing you
uh,
now?
Mulholland again.
Oh,
So
good. Okay. I
I,
know
I've
I
I
know your
found a home.
publicist then, no problem. I'll be sure to get a
Yep.
book and send it out to our book review group. I want to thank you for coming on and just generally talking about writing. I don't often get a chance to talk to someone who's not in the process of launching a book. So, you and I've met a number of times and have spoken all, and I really appreciate you coming on just to talk about writing and how you create your books. Very important for someone like me who loves to know the story behind the story. So thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm someone who early on I read a John Gardner quote that said that you either have talent or you don't, and if you don't have talent, you should learn that quickly and stop the frustration. And I was a little offended by that because I don't think I have actual, born. I don't think anybody has actual, natural talent for writing. I think it's a craft that you're constantly learning, and so I love talking about the craft of writing because I will be a student of writing until the day I die or until I quit writing. I'm constantly trying to learn more and more about the psychology of it and how it
Yeah.
all works.
I think that, perhaps there is natural born talent, but it has to be nurtured and drawn out. So, and some people will, like me, I will never be able to write a book. I can barely get out my front door with my shirt turned out the right way. I can't even send emails without going through spell check and everything else. So but I'm a natural born reader, and that started very young. So, we're a symbiotic team. You write and I'll read it. And,
See, I can't spell worth crap.
oh, well, yeah.
And grammar, my copy editor, the pages come back so red. But I have good ideas, and like I said, I've studied the craft of how to create characters, how to create tension, how
Right,
to tell stories, and
right,
that
right.
is just fun.
I want to thank you for being with me. hold on while I say goodbye to the audience. Thank you for being with me today.
My
You know, I
pleasure.
always give great thanks to my mom and dad who supported me through all my crazy. Audience, you know, you can find us on all audio platforms, and you can find and we archive everything on SoundCloud. So just go to soundcloud.com. Authors on the Air. Thank you for being with me. I'll see you next time.